second time. Look at this. Now I can see the whole thing. I don't know what that trigger is. I'll just have to like email them and go, hey guys, so about this, I need you to fix it. And then like that ring light annoyance. I mean, I went all in. I bought a ring light. I was like, I see people using these, and I guess I should get one for nighttime in case I'm recording at night and people want to see me. So yeah, that's why I was like, audio is so much easier because I could like literally do anything and like walk around the room, go get coffee, that kind of stuff. But as long as I put myself on mute, you couldn't see what I was doing. You didn't know where I was. But now I'm like, I have to sit still and be disciplined, and yeah, okay, it's fine. Anyway,
it's fine. It's fine.
This is fine. It's absolutely fine. So the way I typically do things is I give my guests the floor to like introduce themselves. I'm really big on people like giving us their own names because we understand like the significance of people like mispronouncing names and things like that. And I don't, I usually am good with like, oh, okay, I pronounced that correctly, but I don't take those chances. So, so at that point, I'm like, introduce yourself, but there's also like a very like vibrational impact to like saying your own name in a space. So, yeah. And then I, give us a little bit of background. Like for me, I'm like, give us some context. So when the conversation kind of keeps going, people understand like, oh, okay, this is why. All right, that makes sense. So you're just like how you started, where you are, we usually end up talking about the future at the end, but like, yeah, how you started, where you are, and then maybe any key moments for you that kind of brought you to like your present space. And then usually I'll hear some nugget that I want to jump on and talk about. But at that point, yes. So, I will make myself quiet. I will hit the mute button because I never know what kind of madness will happen outside my window.
Same.
Last night was someone's birthday, and quarantine be damned, everyone wanted to party, and so there was a karaoke machine and a very odd DJ, and I was just like, it's 11:30 at night, guys. So yeah, so that's where I'm living. So I will hit mute, and then whenever you are ready and comfortable and you're feeling like, okay, let's do this thing, then you can start whenever you're ready. Like I tell people, I will edit out awkward pauses and weird things. So.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, my name is Skyler Mapes. I'm the co-founder of Exile Olive Oil, an Italian, actually Calabrian and Italian, because Calabria is technically in the south of Italy. I want to start over. Let's X that out because I don't want to do it, and you're still on mute. So yeah, thank you for that.
Let's try it again. We're good. We'll just do another take. It's all good. All right. Okay. I know that's something I'm like, you have no idea how strange it is. Like, I think people who have to do this for a living all the time take for granted that most of the world does not spend their time talking about themselves and their brands and their work and their projects to the general public. One-on-one, small groups, trade events, stuff like that. Like you find yourself more comfortable because you're talking to other people already there, interested in the product or interested in your service, or they already know who you are. And outside of that, though, it's just kind of like, I tell people three questions usually go through your brain. Number one, will anybody care about what I have to say? Like, that's just a kind of, I think, a natural instinct when you don't talk about yourself all the time. It's like, why would anyone care about me rambling on about myself? Yeah. And at the same time, like, human beings are like innately self-centered. So it's a weird psychology there where you're just like, I want attention, but I don't necessarily talk about myself. And then like the second thing is, I don't normally have to articulate my life in a way that makes sense. Like I don't have to come up with a timeline. Like you literally just living. And now I have to have this timeline for people to help them understand my progress. And you're like, okay, that's not something I've rehearsed. So here we are. Because it's not a spontaneous conversation. You don't usually sit with people and go, well, tell me about your whole life and give me the whole timeline. You're like, that's never a thing. And the third thing is like specifically for me, for like Black women and women of color, we are rarely asked. So
I'm exiting apps right now, by the way.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, as I ramble on, it's all good. As we work and do what we do, we don't necessarily do it because we want people to ask us about it. And we don't expect the world to be interested. because of the nature of who we are. And so when it comes up and people are like, well, tell me about yourself, like, you know, in podcast situations, that's the one thing the biggest lesson I have learned in the last 3 seasons is that for Black women, this space is very new. And as much as we can talk with each other in community about our work and things like that, it's a really different energy because it's like, these are people I trust. These are people I trust with my story. I trust with myself. And when you're putting yourself out there into like a faceless void of people who will listen eventually, it's like, that's risky. And you're used to having to find places of safety. And so for me, it's like watching every episode is like, there's this space where people are like, okay, I'm fine. And that's why I'm like, just talk to me. Like that's where I kind of just talk to me about like, we're just meeting for the first time. Just imagine we're like getting coffee somewhere when the world was open. And, you know, like for me, I've been recording this podcast in my bedroom or in a closet since I started. Yeah. So like quarantine hasn't affected my process in that way. I haven't been in a studio. I had plans to be in the studio, but it was like, it never happened. So at this point, I'm used to like, okay, it's just you and me. We will talk. I will take care of you. Don't worry about it. Like in the editing process, I'm very mindful of certain things. And I just, you know, I try to keep the organic, like humorous stuff in and like the more, that laborious kind of like, I'm thinking of something, I'm trying to create this answer. Like I exit out of that stuff. I like to edit that stuff out so it feels natural because I think once you hear your own playback, and you hear yourself kind of talking naturally about yourself, you're like, oh, you get more comfortable doing it. Yeah. And then it's like, I want to do that some more. I want to be able to practice that a little bit more. So yeah, so I also will just talk to me. Tell me about
I haven't done a podcast in a couple months. That's the other thing. So I'm like, wait, I forgot
how to practice.
It's been like since November. And I'm like, wait, how do I do this again? Who am I?
I'm out of practice. Who am I? What do I do? So yeah, so we'll do another take and whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello, my name is Skyler Mapes. I'm the co-founder of Exile Olive Oil, an Italian-American olive oil company. I'm currently in Calabria, Italy. It's beautiful. The sea is outside of my window right now. So if I could open the window, you would be able to smell the beautiful sea breeze. But for now, we can just act like we can hear the waves in the background. And I love making olive oil. I'm an olive oil producer. I'm a marketer, saleswoman, and I love talking about olive oil and sharing high quality extra virgin olive oil with people.
You know, see, I love when people can make those kind of definitive statements. I love making olive oil. And you're just like, why not jojoba oil or coconut oil or sesame oil or all the other oils? Like, how did you land on olive oil specifically?
That was not intentional. There was not supposed to be any food making at all, actually, because my background's in architecture. So I'm from Oakland, California originally, and I went away to Tempe, Arizona, to Arizona State for university. And I studied architecture.
I lived in Arizona for 10 years. So
where?
I lived in Phoenix. I lived in downtown Phoenix. I've lived in West Phoenix, like in Avondale. Uh-huh. I lived in Scottsdale for a little while. And let's see, the last time I lived there, it was like northwest Phoenix. So like right off of the 17 on like 26th Avenue and Thunderbird.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I am well aware of like ASU and U of A and like I got to the downtown campus more than I got out to Tempe, but Tempe we would go for like shows and stuff like that. But oh yeah.
Arizona's well, I don't want to speak for all of Arizona because I don't know about that. But Tempe and Phoenix are really, really cool. And Scottsdale is beautiful. I mean, Arizona is a beautiful state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's picturesque.
But it's got a lot of weird stuff happening out there. So like, you know, like the people, okay, here's what I have to say about, I love Arizonans. Like, I'm not trying to make a generalized statement, but a lot of them, I like to say, are untethered. It's like they're not walking on the ground.
It's like a great word. They are not tethered to the planet. It only gets stranger when you're in like Tucson and you're just like, where are you? This is not the same planet.
It's like living on this planet, I swear. And the landscape doesn't help at all. It just makes it heightened.
Exactly. Like no one else. no one else has that landscape. Because like when I drove from Arizona to Boston last year or the year before, now that oh god, it's 2021. Yeah, from like the top of 2020, I drove from Arizona to Boston, and so I had to go through New Mexico, and it's such a shift. Like you don't even have to know that the sign for the state line is there. You just know as soon as you like a mile into a new state, you're like, okay, I'm not in Arizona anymore because it's its own place. And yeah, and when you live there, you realize like, no, everyone has a different vibe here. It's not what you think at all. But yes, go ahead.
It,
ASU.
like I said, it is beautiful, and I love going to school at ASU because it's the biggest university in the nation. So you have a lot of diversity there, and they have
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of money, so they're able to get these professors from all over the world. And I had really, really cool architecture professors, and it's because of one of my professors that I was able to get an internship in Barcelona. And without that internship, I would have never met my husband. I would have never gone on this like olive oil adventure.
Oh
And so I
wow.
have ASU and Professor Spellman to thank for that.
Thank you for Professor Spellman and like really awesome like instructors and professors and teachers because they shift your trajectory just in the slightest where you're like I would have never probably pursued this on my own and like to have somebody go you should do that you should
Hmm.
yeah this is for you should try that and you're like okay all right so you get to Barcelona and is that like a senior like graduate like
It was, so I was the only undergrad. She basically said, if you take my seminar, you can go on this internship. And I was like, yeah, duh,
done
like
done
done.
yeah
There's no
yeah
homework. Like it was project based, right? Like we
right
had
yeah
to just get
like
together and like do presentations on on really incredible architecture buildings.
and
And
how hard is that how that's not hard at all
no,
like
no,
I can
it
do
was
that
a great
without a
time.
class
It was so much fun. We had all these professors come in. So I actually met the Benedetta Tagliabue, which is actually a really famous architect. So she runs EMBT, which is one of the
oh
most
okay
famous architecture firms in Spain. And she came in, and a lot of the professors that were in the US that were flown into ASU to teach a seminar. And also, we would focus on their projects. We got to meet all of them. So I got to meet people that used to work for her, and then I got to meet her before I went to work with her. And I was like, "Can I come be an intern?" And she was like, "Of course you can."
of course I can
That's
yes
so
thank you
Spanish. Like whenever she's actually Italian, excuse me, she's from Venice, but she's been in Spain for decades. She's
oh
very Spanish
wow
now.
Oh, wow. And like Arizona is such a great place for architecture as well. Like to talk about like Frank Lloyd Wright and like all of the folks who have shown up and like built these really beautiful spaces and buildings because Arizona kind of affords you all of this room to do something insane and wild and crazy and you know like no one's going to question that your building is slanted and it's fine it's curved it has this huge like insane curve all of a sudden somewhere and you're like who built this? And they're like, it doesn't matter. It's Arizona. It matches the landscape. It's fine. So yeah,
Exactly.
I love it for that because nothing is super tall and it's you know especially if you cross the Paradise Valley and like Phoenix border and you can't build anything higher than like 5 stories in Paradise Valley for a reason and so like the fact that some of that architecture is super intentional because they're like you can't impede the landscape and the view so like keep your buildings short people so when
And
you
you
get to
can do
Arizona ladies and gentlemen you're not going to get skyscrapers like that
exactly. And you can do, well, first, it's very affordable, but also the architects, like a lot of people who I went to school with stayed there because they're able to get so much further in their career in a
yeah
short amount of time than if you're in New York or San Francisco or Chicago, especially Chicago, because it's just such a city full of
yeah
architects and with these
exactly
very established firms that are almost 100 years old or 50 years old, right? And so it's harder to get in. And the design industry is very white, especially architecture.
yes
And
sadly
it's hard to move up when like in an architecture firm. Okay, we're going on a tangent. In an
it's fine
architecture firm, it is so hard to move up. That is why I left the industry because I was like, I'm not working for you for 15 years to make scraps and not do the design, like not even be able to be creative or like do the things, pursue the projects that I would like to
right
pursue. And it's for what? For what? After 15 years, 20 years, then what? Like maybe you're like promoted to partner and you're like, oh, I'm the partner at someone else's architecture firm. Like, no, thank you.
It's that mirrors like the food industry as well. That idea of like you work for a chef or a restaurant for 15 years is like a long time, I guess, in chef years, but like 7 or 8 years, it feels like double that. And then eventually, like, yeah, we'll let you become like a sous chef or a chef de cuisine or a executive chef, but you're still cooking someone else's food. You're kind of still beholden to either a management company or something like that. So you never really get freedom to like do the thing that you signed up for. And so, yeah, I understand that trajectory quite a bit because you're just like, so what do I do? Like, I get out of this and like pursue something else or try to make my own way and create my own path. And like, you realize, you get there and you're like, oh, I understand why all of the white guys are doing well because it's all the white guys holding the keys to the gates. Okay, cool. And yeah, it just, and it makes it, I've been talking to a lot of people about innovation and about how Black people and people of color innovate, and that it's not typically a conversation that we have socially, that Black people are innovative. So when you think about new technologies and just new thoughts, new thinking around anything, it's rare that you have like a Black person's name come up or a person of color's name doesn't come up. It's like, oh, who's doing new things in this? And it's like, well, on the list of people, there's no color at all. And you're just like, well, is that saying that Black people and people of color don't innovate and can't think into the future and can't invent new things? Or is it that we're doing it and no one's paying attention?
Exactly.
So yeah. So like back to the olive oil. So we're in Barcelona.
Yeah.
We're doing an internship.
Amazing, because Barcelona is amazing. And I asked one of the professors at ASU who had spent a lot of time in Barcelona, and I was like, I'm going to Barcelona. What should I do there? And she was like, well, you're going to study, work, or party. And I was like, you're 40 in your late 40s. Hold on.
I'm like, I have options like that. Can I like split my time? Can I do a little of both or all three? Can I party a little bit? Like,
I didn't, and she was a very buttoned up lady, so I was not expecting that. She had like 3 degrees and
so she
was
goes to Spain to turn
Argentinian.
up.
I was not expecting that. It's like about to clutch my pearls. I'm like,
you're just like, okay. I was like, so what do you go for? Like, ma'am? Wow. Wow.
And I was the only undergrad with our group that from ASU that ended up going to Barcelona. So it was all these grad students and then me. And it was so much fun. We were just shoved together in this tiny apartment.
Oh.
And come on, like college life, like immediate. It was just like your classic Barcelona experience. And
you're like, we don't need more room than this. It's fine. It's all good.
And we all got along really well. We're all still friends, which is awesome. Good. And it was the very last weekend of June. And the girls and I, it was 2 guys and then 2 other girls I was living with. And so the girls and I went to Rome for the very last weekend in June. And it was during the second night there that I met my husband, Giuseppe, out and about in Rome at night. And he didn't speak a lot of English. Like, people hear Giuseppe speak English now and they're like, wow, he speaks really good English. And I'm like, yeah, me.
Now he does.
Because of me.
Now he does. Now he does. He has an English-speaking wife, so he does. Yes, thank you.
I still have to practice. My Italian is not the best, but we're getting there.
It's good. It's fine. It's all good.
It's a long language. That's the thing.
It really is. I don't think people appreciate
there's so many syllables in everything.
Everything. I had a guy I worked with at when I was working in hotels, and he was from Sicily, and he would every day, like every time you have to work on your Italian. I'm just like, you're the one out here speaking 4 languages. I am trying to still master the one. So thanks. And he's like, no, work on your Italian. So I started to like pick up things when he would talk. And then I got like, I think I downloaded like Babbel or something just to see if I could like pick up some of it just from repetition. And so I got a little better at it. And so when I got to New York, he came back to New York to manage the Carlisle Hotel. And so every once in a while I would like ping him or like send him a text in Italian. And he's like, you're getting better. And I'm just like, no, I'm not. No, no, trust me. Saying "how are you" is not a taxing thing at this point, but anything else.
But Italians are very encouraging when you learn
They are.
Italian. Like you can say the smallest thing. Like I'll say my mother-in-law and I will have, because she lives next door. So Lena is my
Oh,
mother-in-law. You can see her all on social media because I talk about her all the time. And we'll have a short conversation in Italian, and she's just like, "You're getting better." And I'm like, "You are like 12 out of 10 for support. Very encouraging. Thank you."
I'm like, thank you. You're the kindest person. I was like, I know what I sound like, and I appreciate your encouragement. Well, I mean, how long have you guys been married then? Since that was like undergrad.
5 years in June.
Oh
Yeah.
wow,
So
so cool. And did
sorry, we're getting so off track from
no, we're not. No, see, this is the
bouncing.
thing about this podcast. This is literally why I created it, because like there you will do plenty of press. People will interview you for like magazines and other things to like find out the logistics of your work, because that's kind of the one element of their life, of your life, that they signed up for. And for me, I was like, I want to know the other things. I want to know, because like your work is an expression of your life and an expression of who you are. And so when I will order a bottle of olive oil and I get into it, I want to know like, what can I learn about you based on the products I'm consuming, based on, the label choices you made, and like what your design choices were for your logo and why you chose the name you chose. So like for me, I wanted to give a space for people to learn that Black women and women of color are people first. And we are not the products we sell and not the things we develop and create. We're not our labor in the world. We are ourselves first. And so for me to give people more meaningful experiences with what we do and what we produce, I feel like let's understand who we are first. And also like you can listen to, I think we're at 36 interviews at this point, and know by interview number 5 that like Black women and women of color are not a monolith. Like our lives are very different across the board and have these really beautiful nuances and these gorgeous details that people just overlook and encompass all together. And it's just like, oh, I'm like, so yeah, no, we're fine. We're not off track at all. I'm asking the questions here, ladies. So yes, so your husband, you're an undergrad, you've met this man, and it's kind of like, we'll get to the olive oil in a minute. You're in Rome, you've met this person, and you're like, okay. Did you go home? Have you like been back to the States, or did you
So
just?
we kept in touch after I went back to Barcelona. We spent the rest of the weekend together.
Okay.
And he would like take me and my friends around and drive us and be like, "Okay, after this hour you can drive in down a certain hour you can drive in downtown Rome without having a certain type of permit." And so him and his friend drove us around downtown Rome after. It's very late though. It's like after midnight or like 2 a.m. or something. Of course, we were up all night and are like, "Let's go drive around the Pantheon."
Like,
Because you can do that
okay.
very late at night.
Nice.
And
Oh
so
wow.
that's what we did. It was amazing and obviously worked out well because we're married.
She was like, you had long distance stuff going, and then here we are. Wonderful.
And I ended up staying longer in Europe than I initially planned. And
Okay.
so the internship wrapped up. I went and I traveled around Europe, and then I moved basically in with Giuseppe for a couple months in his Roman apartment. He was like, "Just come stay with me." I'm like, "This is insane. You're just going to invite this American girl to come live with you that you've
It's
only
like,
met
yes,
for
yes, I am.
It's fine."
It's fine. You're good.
And then I moved back to the US. I went to work at an architecture firm, and it was a good firm, I guess. Yeah, no, it was a good firm. It just was um, not what I was looking for in my career. And your first job never,
It
unless
never
you're
really
extremely
is.
lucky, is like what you're looking for a long-term career. But it was a very clear glance, or like I guess clear look into what my future would hold if I pursued the architecture career like route.
Gotcha.
And I just was like, this is not going to work for me. And I went and worked at an structural engineering firm after that. My specialization has always been in 3D modeling. So it's called BIM,
Okay.
which is building information model. So like the 3D renderings that you see of big, like single family homes or bigger structures, like I was responsible for creating those and then putting in like the people and the plants and all that fun stuff.
Nice.
So there were some aspects of it that were really fun and really creative. And I felt like I could, you know, be free and like be more artistic. But I've always liked architecture because it's a balance between being part artist and having a clear structure and foundation that you need to follow. Because if I could never, I mean, I don't want to say never, I don't think I would make a very good artist because there's
Gotcha.
too much lack of direction.
Yeah.
And I get really overwhelmed by too many choices.
That's what, yeah.
So with
Exactly.
architecture, it's like we're building this thing and here's what we need. And then you have like the criteria you have to meet. And I
Exactly.
like that because it has enough structure for me to be creative within.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
goal is
That
very
makes sense.
clear.
That makes absolute sense. Yeah. Most people think, and because the product of creativity, or for most like fine artists, is, looks a certain way, the assumption is like, hey, you don't have to, a lot of these things is like, hey, you can do whatever you want. And it's like, no, you have to have like this internal discipline to stick with what you're doing. Like if I'm sculpting this one thing, no one's directing me to do it, no one's telling me how it needs to look, but I have to like come up with that myself and like ground myself in this idea. And then like that artistic moment pops up when it's like, hey, this is not working the way I wanted to. How do I pivot? How do I solve this problem and still create the thing I want to create? And yeah, that's me. I'm like, if I have a foundation or a structure or an outline to work within, I can be more creative. If I have to, so I've had to always like split my brain and go, okay, I have to create the structure because I want to create something artistic. And so the first thing I have to do is like create the structure I need to work within, because this will not work. It's way too many choices. It's just like,
Yeah.
what green do you want? I don't know.
I
Pick a
loved
green.
architecture also because it's continuously problem solving. Because when you are
Mm,
dealing with codes and with the city and all these regulations, you have to problem solve because you have legal requirements to meet. But in the state of California, it's very, very hard. There's just a lot more requirements today than there used to be, which is good, but it also makes it really difficult to create and pull off certain designs, and also makes it really, really expensive. So then we see this lack of creativity because you can't always build these beautiful or creative structures if you don't have the budget for it. And then that is part of the issue with like why these luxury or like creative things are only created or like built by people with a lot of money.
gotcha.
And so it
Wow.
makes that like luxury or that really highly designed item inaccessible because it's just so expensive to get.
Right. Wow.
And I think in other countries, a lot of Europe, it's still quite affordable to pull off very creative design, especially in architecture. But I also think that there's a different relationship with architects and architecture here.
Okay.
And there's a lot more of them. And there's a lot more independent architects also. So you'll have someone that has their firm or they're just like work independently and it's one or two people. And then by having more options, there's more fish in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pond. And so there's just more options and they're not all working together. It doesn't feel like a giant IKEA of architects.
That is the perfect phrase. Yeah, that nails it. Really, it's not a large IKEA of architects. That I have to use that again for other industries at this point. So now we can get to olive oil. So you exit out of like you just you realize like this is not. I think people forget like when you're thinking about a career, you're also thinking about the life you want to live, like your lifestyle and where it will take you, and hopefully your career is kind of a vehicle for that. And so when you discover like, hey, this is not the vehicle to get to the life I want, or this is not how I imagine my life looking. How does olive oil enter the picture?
So, like I said, it was not intentional at all. Here's what I knew. I knew like a few things. I did not want to be stuck at a desk all day. I did not want to work for someone else's like big or small establishment. Like that just
Mm,
was not going to cut it for me. And I wanted flexibility within my schedule. And when I say that, I don't mean I just wanted to work 6 hours a day. Like, I'm totally cool pulling off a 14-hour day.
Yeah.
I just need to be able to do it on my own terms because I'm a very independent worker. Like, I don't like distractions. I like to be focused and honed in on my work, but I want to do it on my own terms. And I love working from home. And working in food was Giuseppe's idea. I had tasted what I considered, I guess I can say real olive oil, like true, I don't like that word. What olive oil is supposed to be, what olive oil can be for the first time in Italy the summer I met Giuseppe. So the summer of 2014, when I came to Calabria to meet his parents, because like a couple weeks after he met me, he was like, come meet my mom in Calabria. And so that happened. I flew to Rome. We drove down to Calabria. I met his mom. He introduced me to his olive trees, and I tasted real olive oil. And it was just so different. And I was like, what is this? And he's like, it's olive oil. I'm like, what? Like, with what? And he's like, olive oil. Like 100%.
From these trees I just introduced you to? What are you talking about?
And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, it just tastes so different. I didn't ask a lot of questions about it. I just thought it was like this cool thing that tasted really good. And that was it. So while he came to visit me in the US, we went shopping for olive oil, and we were in a big box store, and I'm not going to say the name because I don't feel like getting sued today. No. And it was just like the same thing over and over again. And then we went to a luxury grocery store in the Bay Area, and it was like the same 5-10 brands, whatever. I feel like there's just the same 20 brands like on repeat in different versions of them throughout grocery stores all across the US. Like, even in the high end ones, it's just very homogenous. And then when you looked at I started reading the labels because we started paying more attention to things. So we could see what was happening in the industry. And everyone had the same varietals. Everyone was making like the same kind of type of olive oil. And then a lot of the Californian oils just started tasting all the same to me. And I was like, I love Californian oil because I'm from California, and I don't like to speak poorly about Californian products because I think they're amazing. But there's diversity in each industry for a reason.
Yeah.
And it gets really difficult to have diversity when the industry gets kind of like taken over by these homogenous group of products from California and from other places. I'm not trying to just single out California.
That's the challenge with like commercializing any food situation, is that you end up with only a handful. We've watched it in retail. Once you start to find, in the name of convenience, you have brands like Amazon who kind of consolidate for the consumer in a service sense, like get everything from one place, because people do like the one-stop shop situation. This is why we still have like convenience stores and stuff like that, and big box stores. It's like, can we go into one place? Can I eliminate my like to-do list and like not have to go to 9 different places to get, my list done? So I understand the methodology to like, let's put it all in one place, and then let's give people fewer choices. Like, let's not eliminate all of them, but let's consolidate all these choices, because consumers won't educate themselves. Like, the assumption that they won't educate themselves on the options. I think this is why, like, when we talk about wine, people get very, like, their eyes glaze over. They get really frustrated and overwhelmed and intimidated because they're like, there's just so much to choose from. I'm like, but that's the nature of all food. If we're doing it right, you should have a lot to choose from. And even more specifically, you should be able to choose from a lot in the region you live in the city you live in. Like, there should be a lot of variety just within that space. And in an effort to eliminate frustration for a consumer, and like, it retrains your brain, unfortunately. So when people shop, they're just like, there's like 9 boxes of crackers, and I just want a box of crackers. I'm like, well, pick one. Well, I don't know which one I want. I'm like, okay, so that's mental laziness. Let's not.
Yeah.
It's just crackers. Just pick a cracker, for the love of God. And so that idea of like removing people's choices to it reduces their ability to kind of be discerning about what they're eating and what they're choosing and what they buy. And so, of course, in the name of capitalism, you respond to the market demand. And if the market demand says we only want to choose from 6 olive oils,
Yeah.
and all the others go away, you're just like, so for the rest of us who want more olive oils to pick from, what do we do? So that sounds about right for the United States.
And it is happening. This is also the effect of globalization, right? Like it's happening everywhere. It's happening in Italy and Spain. And we're seeing a lot of the smaller producers of these products kind of just disappear. I think it's especially happening. Well, olive oil industry is weird because you have these giant producers and then you have these smaller producers, but creating high quality, small quantity olive oil
Mm,
is expensive, takes a lot of time, and it's usually something because it's so expensive. It's usually something that people do as like a second career, or you fall into it. Kind of how I've fallen into it. It's very challenging for someone who is young and wants to get into the olive oil industry, and they've made that decision when they're like 21, 22, especially in California. It is so expensive. And
mm,
you see some of these olive oil companies that are popping up and these brands now, and we'll talk about the difference between like a brand owner, a producer, farmer, and someone like us that does everything.
okay.
And because there are kind of these different levels within the industry, but in Italy and Spain and a lot of regions in Europe, it's easier to have a larger number of small brands because you still have a lot of property owners, and
Mm,
because the government is more willing to help you if you own a certain amount of or a certain size property. And also they don't see that property as a burden. Like if you owned an acre or 2 acres in California, especially in the Bay Area, it is a burden. I mean, the taxes alone, like the taxes, you're going to be paying like $20,000 a year in property taxes. Like,
like,
no
oh my
freaking thank
God.
you.
Yeah.
In Europe, that is seen as like one way for you to produce food for your family. Like, you're not going to be taxed up the wazoo because you own that property. Like, it just doesn't make that much sense, especially in a place like Calabria or out in the country, like further away from a city in Spain or something. Like that's just not going to happen because you're growing your
Mm,
food on that piece of property. Maybe you're selling olive oil locally to your friends. It's yeah, it's kind of like a birthright. It's like this is our land, and I'm going to use it and like grow food here and love it. Like, why
right.
wouldn't we do that? Come on. Who wants to help me pick olives? Like, do you want olive oil?
Right. I'm just like, we've created some industry here. We're providing a service. We're providing like a local product. And, we can be stewards of this land. So that means that the government doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It's a win-win. I don't, but
But I think how I entered the olive oil industry was through seeing how disappointed Giuseppe was with the olive oil selection in California. He was just like, I need to talk to my mom. Like, she needs to send me a couple liter tanks. We're not doing this. So he called her. He was like, Ma, can you send me some oil, please? And she was like, yeah, whatever. I'll send you oil. And then our friends were asking, can she send us oil? And he was like, hold on. There could be a business here. So
there's
she
something
didn't
here. Yeah.
end up sending us oil because we decided to pursue the olive oil idea. But I went and worked at a winery. My friend owns a winery in the Bay Area. And I was like, Shauna, can I please come work under you? I need to learn if this is going to be, if this is even remotely what I want to do, because being in the cellar is a very similar environment to milling and producing olive oil.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be around the equipment to even know, like, is this? Because if I hated it, I couldn't make olive oil if I didn't like being around like this big old
Hello.
press and tractors and in a cold cellar. Like, no, I would have hated it. And so, being there after the first couple days, I thought it was so cool. She's zipping around the cellar with the forklift, and there's just all these grapes coming in, and there's this huge refrigerator. It was like a
Ooh.
giant science experiment
Oh
that was
yeah.
never ending and it just was never ending because wine has to be aged, so it has to be racked during a certain time of year.
Yep.
And I was mostly there during the harvest, and so the grapes would come in and we'd either press or crush them. And then they would go and they would ferment, and then we put them in the tanks. And I just learned so much, especially about like the timeline of from when the grapes get in to when they go into tanks to when
Ooh,
they're
yeah.
eventually going to be put in the barrels. And I just learned, I was fascinated. I thought it was so cool. And I said, if making olive oil is anything like this, I want to do
I'm in.
it.
Sign me up. I'll do it. Thanks, friends. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's similar to like what I opened a property as a guest service agent in Paradise Valley, the Monte Lucia. And we had a restaurant on site, and the GM that we had, he had gone to Spain every year with his family, and they would go to Andalusia, and they would do the whole thing. And so when they tasked him to build the property, he used those experiences. And so the property itself, specifically in Arizona, is very unique because of its inspiration. It's really inspired by Spain and Turkey and Morocco, and it has a lot of those influences there, a lot of like Moorish influences. And so the restaurant is the same. It's the restaurant was called Prado and still there. And the original executive chef that opened that restaurant was from we had their GM was from Venezuela, and he was from Italy. And I was just like, okay, these guys are hilarious together. And when he started the menu, he had the same problem with the olive oil. He was just like, what is this? I'm not using any of this. And so he asked his mom to send him olive oil for the restaurant. It was fantastic. And so he made this gelato out of it
Yeah.
that has forever changed my entire life. Like I had it once, and because he made dinner for me and a friend, and we were like dying and like melting into the chairs because the meal was fantastic. And then he brings the dessert out, and it's like this beautiful dark chocolate ganache tart, and it finished with like a hit of like pepper and chili and a little bit of flake sea salt, little Maldens. And then I was like, well, give me the gelato. And it didn't say what type of gelato, it just says gelato on the menu. And I'm like, all right, I'll get the gelato. So it comes out and I'm eating it, and I'm just like, the texture was incredible. And I'm just like, what is happening right now? And so I'm thinking it's this like citrus kind of gelato. So I get through it, and he comes out and he's like, how was everything, guys? And, and you're thinking this is a coworker. So he's like, I just want to make sure everything's good. And I'm like, oh, it was great. I was like, what kind of gelato was that? What kind of fruit was in the gelato? Because I was in culinary school at that point. So my palate was there, and I was like, I'm detecting some things. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, what kind of fruit is in there? Are we talking like uzu? Are we talking like Meyer lemons? What are we doing? And he's like, there's no fruit in there. And I'm like, huh? I was like, so what did you make this out of? He's like, it's the olive oil. And I literally pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked away in silence. I was just like, we're done here. I don't want to talk to him anymore. We're finished. And I just like, so I understand like going to taste it for the first time and realizing like I haven't been eating olive oil. That's like, it's so far from the fruit that I've never tasted it before. And so, and even when you eat olives and you realize, okay, I'm eating these olives, and then I go have olive oil, and there's no relationship there. And you're like, so how are they so different from each other in like flavor profile? So I understand everybody's experience here. I get it. Because ever since then, I was just like, what am I supposed to do now? Now that I know that olive oil can be this.
I know. It ruined. We have ruined. Do you know how many people's lives I've ruined through exposing? I'm just like a life ruiner.
That's great. That's the best type of ruining.
Olive oil. They're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm breaking up with my.
This is the marketing campaign that we need for your olive oil. It's like, break up with your olive oil.
Yes, break up with your olive oil.
Break up with your olive oil. There you go.
The other thing,
I've got a new relationship.
The other thing about olive oil that's crazy is that it tastes like all the things, like what it tastes like. And when I say that, when you taste it, you're like, I know these things. Like all things are familiar to me, and I've had all of these things before. But what is this?
What is this? It tastes like all the things I've ever eaten. What is this? It's so, I think so. Like, everyone just understand, like, break up with your olive oil. We'll give you resources. We'll give you a resource for new olive oil relationships, but break up with your current olive oil. Yeah. It's not doing anything for you at this point. Oh my gosh. So yes. So now we're like, you've gone to the vineyard, you've done the work, you realize this is something we can get into, this is something we can do. And you're still in California at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
then
we moved to Calabria. So Giuseppe's from La Castella, Calabria. And we moved here in September 2017. And Calabria, a lot of people don't know where it is, which is totally normal because you have her really showy cousins up north, just like flaunting the goods, and
yeah,
Calabria never gets any good marketing until now.
of course. I mean, like, I know where it's located and I know where it is for a
Yeah,
number of different reasons, but yes, I
Cala-
understand.
Calabria is in the ball of the toe, so it's right across the water from Sicily. And you can actually, if you go to Reggio Calabria, you can see Sicily, and it's only a 30-minute ferry ride. And Italians can be very inefficient with many things. They do not mess with their ferries. You'll get on that ferry so fast. Like it'll be chaotic to get a ticket, and it'll be chaotic to find out where to pull in to get on. But they will organize like you have never seen before to get you onto the ferry. And
Okay.
then you only have time to get out of your car for one coffee. And then after that, they're like, wrap it up. We're done here. Everyone back in their car, get off the ferry. And then you're off that bad boy so quick. It's
Wow.
incredible. And they leave on time.
See, they're
They don't
like,
do
no.
anything on time except for ferry
Except
rides
for the ferry. Wow. I
and
wonder who
dinner.
established that energy around the ferry. Like the first person to be like, this is what we don't fool with. Like, no, if we're going to do this, this is not the place to play around, guys. Wow. That's awesome. So was like that family property that he owned or?
Yeah, so Giuseppe's grandfather used to be a really large landowner here. And then he sold off some of the property. It got divided between several different family members. And Giuseppe's parents also bought some. And so we have our properties, which is like our immediate families. And then we're surrounded by aunts and uncles and cousins.
Nice.
And everyone, we're in a town of 1,400 people. Like we know Giuseppe's related to more than half of them, like 70% are some sort of cousin, and they know where everybody's property is, so you know who your neighbors are. Like our right now where we live in downtown, and some people live out in the olive trees like on their properties, but for the most part I'd say people live downtown. And then when you want to go in campagna is what they call it, you drive there for the day or for a couple hours, whatever, and then you go and like harvest the vegetables, or you take care of your trees, and then you're there for a little bit. You get what you need and then you go back home.
Gotcha. Nice. Okay. I mean, land ownership is an entirely like 4-hour podcast with like 9 different people on it. And like the fact and just what that looks like and what that means generationally for people, and for like wealth and for resources and all the things. So we'll stick with olive oil because there's tangents galore in that conversation.
No, my grandfather was a huge land developer in the Bay Area, and my family still owns quite a bit of property in the Bay Area. And
Nice.
unfortunately, I've distanced myself from them quite a bit, but I
Gotcha.
am very familiar with like
With
land ownership.
ownership.
Just ownership is weird in the US. It
Yeah.
is
Oh
so
my
weird. In
God.
Italy, they live like our house. Giuseppe's family owns this building, but our house is like right next door to his parents' house, and then right behind us we have a couple of units that belong to an aunt, and then everything above us is Giuseppe's and his family's. And so when our family grows, we'll grow here. Or if we have a
Mm,
kid and they don't want to live anywhere else, they can live here. We don't have this like weird ownership where like this
yeah.
is mine and then you have to go get yours. Like
Yeah.
we're a family and we take care of each other.
Each
And then
other.
if
Yep.
someone needs something, we provide them with it. Or if there's a friend who really is in need of something, like we give it to them. Why would you withhold something from somebody if you can help them and give it to them?
Yeah.
I've never
That
understood
attitude. That
that.
attitude is definitely is part of the reason why we are where we are. Is this idea of and it's funny because it's like it's wrapped up in kind of this delusion of the American dream of, well, if everybody works hard, they can have something, and you're just like,
What? No.
That's not true.
No.
No, that's just, I'm like, we can dissect that fallacy later. Um, so now we're like, so I'm trying to keep on the timeline because yes, at some point we do have to discipline ourselves to talk about the olive oil. So we're on. So now you're back in Calabria, and are you reestablishing a business? Is this something that was like a local business and it became a like global business? Like, was he already like selling olive oil or producing olive oil or?
Yeah, they were selling commercially, but not how we are now. They would sell it more in bulk, and also just like his parents have always had other professions.
Okay,
Actually, like very demanding because they were both directors for local government agencies, and so
gotcha.
they had very demanding jobs. And so farming was never something that they hyper focused on. His father, Giuseppe's father, retired quite young, and so he was able to plant more olive trees on their family property, and then those grew up, and Giuseppe spent a lot of time there with his dad. So he grew up like playing in the olive trees with his cousins and stuff, which just sounds adorable and lovely. And like getting
Yes.
sick after eating too much fruit, which like kids that grow up in the countryside with like lots of wild fruits and vegetables knows the cherry ache. Like you get a
Yeah, you're
stomach
like, I
ache
did
from
too much.
eating.
It's that line. You're like, I've hit the wall and I shouldn't have been this irresponsible with my consumption. Yeah.
And so when we started this company, we knew what we had to do, but not. It was very different because then we had to scale it, right? It's one thing if you're producing enough oil to just like sell the extra, because his family would produce oil every year, every 2 years, and then they would sell whatever they weren't going to use.
Gotcha.
But to create a product with the intention to sell it to the public, especially when you're importing to the US and you're dealing with FDA regulations and labeling and other restrictions, that's a whole other ballgame. You're creating a brand, and then
Yeah.
that's not even touching on marketing and introducing and educating consumers on what the product is and what it isn't. And so 2017 was really the year when we were harvesting and harvesting the product in order to create the olive oil, starting those relationships, partnerships. Most of the people that we worked with then we're still working with. Actually, almost all of them except for one vendor we're still working with, and they're all family owned. And last year we were at, I think, 80% of our products made in Calabria, and now we're 100%. All of our products are either made in, like with our vendors. So I'm talking about our boxes, the tops, like
Gotcha. Okay.
labels. Every single piece is either produced in Calabria or resold by a Calabrian business, and
Nice.
every single
Okay.
one is family owned, and we know all
That's
of the
perfect.
owners.
That's fantastic. Like to have your entire time, like your entire process, produced or sourced locally is the game. I mean, because it goes back into the community and back into those families, and so you can continue to. It makes it sustainable. I think
Exactly.
that's the word I'm looking for. It makes
And
it
I think that
sustainable.
one of the things that people don't really realize about Calabria is that it's a very, very poor region of Italy. I think in the
Mm,
US, we have this perception, at least I know I did. I had this perception of Italy being a very wealthy country, and they had so much tourism. And I thought I would think about like the Tuscan landscape and Rome and Venice, and I had no idea what was lurking under the surface, and I definitely didn't
mm,
know what was happening in South Italy. And so Calabria, there's parts of it here where it looks like a third world country, and I'm like, I'm not in Italy right now. I'm in a
yeah,
different country. It does not look like Italy. It doesn't feel like Italy. It is a different place. And also Calabria, a lot of their funding has just kind of disappeared. It doesn't go where it's supposed
yeah.
to. And without that funding into the infrastructure here, it means that the roads don't get updated when they're supposed to. We still only have like one railway. So two trains can't be on the track at the same time. Like, can you imagine? Okay. The train has to go in
Yeah.
one direction for like the certain hours during the day. Like you can't have two trains on the track. That's
See,
insane.
and I don't think people. I mean, for me, like, because poverty looks the same everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's that it presents itself in the same way everywhere. Like oppression and um lack, and all of those things show up the same way no matter where you go. And so I think that's why it's so recognizable. Like, when you're in the presence of it, no matter where you've been, and you're just like, yeah, I went to so and so, and then you like scratch the surface a little bit, and it's like underneath of that is something I'm very familiar with, because it's like the energy is not any different there. It's like, okay, and like your question, which was essentially like a rhetorical one, but like, why would you withhold something from somebody if they need it? And so like the idea of the energy around like withholding things from people, and whether it's intentional or malevolent or unintentional or accidental, you're just kind of like, at some point, there's something, you can't get access to what you need, and it looks the same all the time. And so it's just, it's always jarring. I think it should be. I don't know if anyone should ever be sensitized to desensitized to that. I think it's a human instinct to kind of look at something and go, people need things here. What can we do to solve that problem? And when you turn that part of your soul off, you get what we get here. So, it's a profitable benefit to making sure we withhold things. And I think that's where like the United States can sometimes feel unique in this space, is that they are one of the only systems I know that find profit in poverty. We can make money off of poor people by them staying poor. We can make money off of keeping resources from people. And it's just like, wow, like what level of crazy do you have to exist in to like look at people who have nothing and go, but we can still squeeze $1 out of that situation. And I'm just like, you go to around the world, and like not all countries, look at that the same way. And it's just like, it's there, but it's not like we're looking at a way to profit from it. So yeah. So, okay. Well, I mean, like, again, there's another good reason to break up with your olive oil. Like, where's your olive oil being made? How's it being bottled and packaged? Who's doing it? Is it benefiting anybody but another big brand that's already doing just fine? Or could you benefit a community of families instead? So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that works. Yep. So like creating a name, and like back to like the branding and marketing side of that, like to create an actual brand and create a system that allows you to kind of keep things in circulation. Because initially it sounds like, hey, we harvest this olive oil, we sell off our extra, and now we intentionally are producing this product. And so this product needs a name, it needs a label, it needs a bottle, it needs a life in the market. So what does that conversation look like?
We wanted to create a product that felt luxurious, but not over the top guilty luxurious. And I was just talking about this with a really good friend the other night. So when you use something and you love it and you enjoy it, you don't have this guilty feeling about using it. And that's what I want. And just that's what both of us wanted people to have and feel when they used our olive oil. Like, this is beautiful and good, and it's good for me, and I love it, but it's not over the top,
Right.
self-indulgent. And we wanted that to be reflective in every single aspect. So it had to look good. Obviously, it was going to taste good because we were making it. But other than that, it had to look good. And then we also walked the olive oil shelves in the US and also here in Italy. And it was just full of like doodad, swirl, olive tree, like women, like round, doing things. And we didn't want that. Or like, how about it just says like olive oil, and then you just have like a very clear, just a very clear label. Like, we don't need to have all these things on the label. We're both very simple people. We don't like anything to be overly detailed.
Gotcha.
And also because the olive oil industry is so old, and it is dominated by older people, they have a little bit different of like a aesthetic than the younger generation. So we wanted it to appeal to many different people. Like, we're not just targeting millennials. Like, that's not who XOW is targeting. A lot of our customers are over 50, but we didn't want it to feel like we were excluding millennials, because that's our generation. It just, I don't know, we didn't want it to feel aged. Like, the olive oil is already full of so many old things and old people, and olive trees are old as hell. we did not need anything else old and up in here. Like, we need
Yeah.
young.
She's like, even the trees is old, y'all. Let's not do that. Wow. It makes sense. I mean, like, everything is like, if you go to the olive oil like aisle in a grocery store, everything is like that weird shade of green, and most of the labels do have like this garish olive on it, like this is kind of cartoonish illustration of an olive, or you have like some woman on a Grecian urn, which makes
Exactly.
no sense at all for olive oil, and you're just like, why would you? Okay, it looks like the beginning of the Hercules movie. I don't, that doesn't make any sense to me. And, I usually am attracted to packaging that's like a lot more simple, like a lot more simplistic. And it's just like, okay, just tell me what's in it, where it's from, and we can move on. Cause I already I showed up in the aisle because I need olive oil.
Exactly.
So you don't have to sell me on it. I don't need this to tell me anything. I need the details though. So I'm just like, do what you do with a bottle of wine. Like, where is it from? Who's producing it? And, give me some dates and some times, like the things that are pertinent to me picking a better olive oil. But like the pictures
Exactly.
they don't help me. And you're just like, okay, well,
And
if
so
I
we
must.
also wanted to create a couple different olive oils because we have different flavor profiles depending on which trees we're harvesting, which rows, like olive, and we can get into that. But we still produce, actually this year we produce 4 different types of oil, but we always produce the Avis, the Tutti, and the Lena, which are our 3 main oils. And then we produce the number 9, which is a cooking oil, which will be coming out later this spring. I'm really excited about.
Nice. I was going to have questions about that, but never mind. I'm good.
Yeah. And they have completely different flavor profiles, and the reason being because they're from different family properties. And so all of the family properties are organic. We're not certified organic, but they're grown organically, and they're tested twice a year by our chemists. And then we also send all of our oils to panel with a wonderful agronomist at his private panel here in Calabria, and we test acidity levels, polyphenol levels, peroxide levels, like everything that you need to test to make sure your olive oil is actually extra virgin. We test. So all of our oils go to lab, which is extremely important.
Yeah.
And then on the back of our labels, it has the harvest date, the bottle date, and then you can find the acidity and peroxide level, polyphenol levels on our website. And if you're having trouble navigating our website, you can always email us for that information. But there's not a lot of transparency. Like in the olive oil industry, there's different organizations whose rules you can follow. Like California Olive Oil Council has their own regulations. International Olive Council has their own regulations, and they're in Madrid. And we use each one kind of as a guide because we're not part of any one organization. And when you produce olive oil, you're not obligated. You don't have to join and be like, we're certified by this board or that board. Like, you don't have to do that. But there's not truly a regulatory party who's going to test your oil and say whether or not it's extra virgin. Like, there's just not a ton of regulation in the industry, which makes the industry troublesome. And so on one hand, it's good because it makes it affordable for producers like us to create a really high quality product, because we can send our oils to lab ourselves at a lab that we really, really trust. On the other hand, it's not regulated. But when you introduce certain types of regulation, it allows that establishment or that organization to kind of mess with things. You know what I mean? Like, if they're like, well, you have to test at this lab or you have to do this, then you start to get into, I can't afford that. Why do I have to follow your exact rules? Like, the whole point of producing food is to be able to be creative and create beautiful, delicious products and not have to follow someone else's rules. So it's it's hard.
Yeah, it's a line and a balance always. And it's like, it's like not being able to get like raw milk in the United States.
Yeah.
Or really good cheese, or what is it? Like black-footed pigs for your making pancetta or prosciutto. Like, oh, the United States is like, you can't do none of that here, and you're just like, but other people are doing it.
You're like, but it's my choice. That's the other thing.
If I'm going to, hopefully in the future with this whole mask business, we can use this as an example to argue our points about being able to get raw milk in this country. If they had a choice to not to walk in with a mask, I should be able to buy raw milk. Like, I'm just saying.
I buy raw milk at the grocery store here, not regularly, because it goes bad so quickly. So when I am able to use it, I can buy it, and it's from a local farmer here. I don't know them, but I know that they sell it, and it looks very commercialized. Like, their label looks very commercialized. I'm like, this is very official. Like, this would be all the
like, I'm waiting for
this.
I'm looking for a handwritten label on a glass bottle. What is this?
No, but it's because it's normal here, and it's not a huge amount. Like, of course, they're producing quite a large amount, but it's not so commercial, I guess.
Right.
That it's
right.
I don't know. You just have
not at the pace that we're doing it. Yeah, it's not like you're getting like, oh yeah, the fact that we're producing so much milk that you can go into like a 7-Eleven and grab a gallon of milk. That's a lot of milk. I mean, you have put milk everywhere. You've got milk in schools, you've got milk in convenience stores, gas stations, grocery stores. Like, there's milk everywhere. And so, like, yes, you should be able to produce it in larger quantities if you have enough cows, but like at the pace that we're producing it, like, people aren't even drinking it enough to justify this level of milk production.
So it's like this bottle of water. I'm holding up a Calabria bottle of water. This is Calabrian sparkling water, and it's from here. It's from this region. But you're not going to find this all over Italy. Like, it's very popular here, and the label, it's like very official. I'm sure they make a couple millions of bottles every year, but it doesn't feel like this exploitive company.
Right. I'm just like,
it just feels like it's a company that makes a lot of sparkling water, and that's it.
Water. That's all we're asking from producers in general. Like, what we've done here is monstrous. And so you're just like, you can produce a few million bottles a year, but doesn't necessarily mean you have to like take over the world. Just stay in your lane. It's fine. Like, make your stuff look good. Make it, competitive, but like, when we get to this point where it's just gross and you're like, it's the same, and then you find out like the same 6 bottles are from the same brand, but they've just slapped different labels on them.
Drives me insane. Anyway. That's happening with olive oil right now. There's a company that's buying up a bunch of olive oil brands, and I'm like, okay, here we go.
To what end? This is what, for me, like, outside of profit, why would you do that? There's no reason, because it's literally it's driving a profit margin, and that's all that is. And so that means we suffer with like bland, mediocre olive oil, which for me is deeply.
About you? What about the investors?
Exactly. And then I'm deeply in, and for me, I'm like, so do investors not eat or sleep or use products or exist in? Are they alien? Like, help me. And that's one of my favorite arguments. It's like, well, we have shareholders, and I'm like, okay, so do they not consume anything? Do they live in a bubble and so they don't require exercise or rest? Are they robots? Is it an AI that's your shareholder? Somewhere, and it's like, when you start to, I loved your point about luxury, and it's something that I've been obsessing over for the last couple of years, is like, what does luxury really mean? What does that look like, and how is that executed and expressed in the world? And is luxury synonymous with cost? Like, that conversation is immediately what comes up when someone says something's luxurious, or it's in the luxury category. And the first thing that people assume is that it's going to be expensive. And I'm like, but luxury is an experience. It's not something. It has, and like, when you look at the definition of the word luxury in the dictionary, it never says anything. Like, there's like 3 or 4 new definitions that add this conversation around cost, but old original definitions have nothing to do with cost and everything to do with like expression and experience. How does it feel? Like, when you go into the Sistine Chapel and you look up, that is a very luxurious experience. And for me, I'm just kind of like, can we kind of tweak this conversation around luxury? Like, luxury is a really great bottle of like bubble bath. something rich that smells amazing, that you feel good when you sink into. Doesn't have to be an expensive bottle of it, but it's well made. You can tell there's a lot of thought and care behind it because of how it works. And I'm just like, so can we live in that space around luxury? There are some really beautiful properties around the world where you can stay. They aren't all very expensive, but the experience of staying there is super luxurious because you feel so well taken care of. And so for me, like, to your point about the olive oil, I'm just like, luxury olive oil means it tastes incredible. It feels good going down. It feels good in your mouth. It smells wonderful when you crack the bottle open. You feel well nourished when you're finished eating it. And for me, I'm like, so that speaks to luxury to me. Like, there's plenty of like $40 bottles of olive oil out there that are trash. Let's just say it. They are not, just because the price point's high doesn't make them luxurious. So,
Exactly.
oh yeah. So again, ladies and
Price does
gentlemen,
not equal quality, everyone. Price does not equal quality. I'm
just,
not gonna even go. We're not gonna go there.
I just, because think of all the people who look expensive, but they aren't quality people. So yeah. Oh man. And
yeah. And also, here's the thing that bothers me the most is when we have, okay, wait, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the difference. This is so important. This is so important between a brand owner, a producer, a farmer. And yeah, let's just focus on those three. A brand owner is someone that owns, in the olive oil industry, is someone that owns an olive oil brand. They may be responsible for marketing that product. They may be responsible for creating the name of that product. And they purchase the oil from someone else. It can be an importer, it can be a middleman, it can be a producer, it can be a farmer, it doesn't matter. They purchase that product, that oil, from someone else, and they're putting their label on it, and then they're selling it to the public. That is not an olive oil producer. That is a brand owner. There is nothing wrong with that. Not saying that, I'm not trying to connect any negativity or bad things onto that. However, as an olive oil producer, it's very difficult in this industry when I see brand owners speak on production, and a lot of things there get lost because I'm like, that's not what's happening at all. Different things. Then you have producers. A producer is someone that makes olive oil, but that's where we get tricky, because you can produce olive oil and you can be an olive oil producer without having harvested the plants. You could purchase olive oil from someone else and do the blending and send your oils to panel and make sure that your blends are really incredible, and then bottle it and sell it to the public, and also be a brand owner. So that way you're a producer, a brand, and a brand owner.
gotcha.
Then you go all the way back to the farmer. The farmer is the person and or group of people, organization, whatever, that is farming and harvesting the olives, that are going out there at the crack ass of dawn to get the olives off of the tree, take them to the mill. Once they go into the mill, the olive oil comes out, and then they have that olive oil. And that means that they're a farmer and olive oil producer. There are people that are strictly olive farmers that sell their olives to others for brining purposes in order to make olive oil. That person exists as well. There is no one road or one way to produce olive oil. And I think it's very clear that we kind of go through what each person's, how people may exist in this world, because just because you own an olive oil company does not mean that you're a farmer. It doesn't mean that you're a producer. It means that you own an olive oil company, and there's a lot behind that that should be discussed.
Yeah. Oh. And like, I think when people start to think about like retail and selling things and getting into like that particular game, they have to think about like private labeling and things of that nature, because you do have a lot of, when you walk into a handful of larger stores, and I don't have to worry about being sued. So when you walk into like a Target or a Walmart or or a Costco, and they have their own labeled brands, a lot of time they're a private label. They have a private label branch of their company that exists, and so they do take products that are already in the market, and they become brand owners of a lot of those products because they're able to develop the label, create a distribution channel, and create retail space on their shelves for their own brand. I'm like, so private labeling. I also like private labeling in and of itself is not a terrible idea. I think it's the ethics behind what you do. How invested are you in the people actually producing the product that you're putting your label on? Like, what are you doing to uphold and lift that particular industry, company, brand, or whoever you're using in the bottle at that point? And like, how do you take care of them? How is the relationship mutually beneficial at that point? And unfortunately, with a lot of brands, a lot of large companies like that not those specific ones. I love Target. Don't get me wrong. That the challenge typically is that because there's no oversight and there's no like independent like review, no one knows like how heavily abused a lot of those relationships are. And so like I think like when the fashion industry started to kind of talk about their own challenges in that way, and the fact that they were producing these really beautiful garments and but how it's being produced, who is being exploited in its production, it makes it like it's less sexy at that point. It's
It
not
creeps me out,
luxurious.
honestly. When I don't know who is making the products, I get creeped out. And with olive oil, because I know lots of things. Got so much dirt
She's like, I got so
I
much
can't share.
tea.
Got lots of things that I can't say.
Yeah.
Because Calabria is the second largest olive oil producer in Italy. Puglia is the first region.
Okay.
And all of South Italy, so that's anywhere from Campania down, they produce 84% of all of Italy's olive oil. And just Puglia and Calabria together produce 62%. So imagine trucks and trucks and trucks coming down here, hooking up hoses like gas. Like these are the
Yeah.
size of a gas truck that's going and stopping at all the gas stations to refill the gas. Imagine those trucks coming down here picking up oil, and there's so many things that happen behind the closed doors that we don't see. And so when
Yeah.
people are like, yeah, I just buy this olive oil, I'm like, I understand that's the decision that you're deciding to make, but there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
It's
Oh my
taken me
God.
years to unpack, and then we're not even going into like how much workers are exploited here and the seasonality of workers in the olive oil industry. Because this is the thing that's tough about this industry is that we only harvest from September to December. And that's actually a long time frame. Like it's not continuous. It'll be like some months are on, some months are off, some weeks we're
Got
on,
you.
some weeks are off. But for the most part, that's what's happening. We're working on and off throughout the entire fall to bring in the harvest. And Giuseppe and I, we work every single day out harvesting. Like I'm not kicked back in a chair, just like, can you get the olives off the top of the tree, please? That would be so lovely. Thank you. Like that's not what I'm doing.
It's like that's not my life.
No, I'm
Because
like climbing
anyone
in the
was like,
tree.
I'm just
Um, it's very physically taxing and exhausting, and I love it. But it's very long days, 14-hour days, as we harvest in the morning and then we take the olives in the afternoon to the mill to get milled. And then at the very end of the day, we have olive oil that comes out. But also that relationship with the mill is very crucial because you want to make sure you're going to a good mill that's clean, that they're like rinsing out the machines after every single use so your olives aren't getting contaminated by somebody else's product because maybe their olives were sitting for a little bit longer. Like
right.
there's very specific details that you have to pay attention to in this industry, and it is all in the details. That's not, you can't like fix olive oil. I mean, you can if that's what you want to do, you can fix it, but that's not
Yeah.
a road
We
that
all
we
know how.
take.
Right. And like, and we all know what that looks like when a brand chooses to fix something.
Yeah, no thanks.
I don't
You can
suggest.
blend, like if we had like the Lena a couple months ago, it's just up and I tasted it and it was so bitter and like I started tearing up. I was like, we can't sell this to people. It's too, the polyphenols before we filtered were over 1,000, which is insane. Like usually polyphenols for oils are 300 once they're in a bottle.
Wow.
And all of our oils have really high polyphenol content, and polyphenols are antioxidants.
Right.
It was over 1,000, and now it's still over 800 even after filtering. So it was like tasting gasoline.
You're like, okay,
We're like, we
so
can't do this. We have to add more of a different kind
wow.
of oil.
I'm like, so can we turn this into a lip balm or maybe a faced oil or something? It's got all the antioxidants, but I'm not eating it. She's like, but
Yeah.
I'll apply it to my skin, but I'm not going to eat it. Oh my God.
So she's
Wow.
calmed down a little bit, and the Lena will
Okay.
continue to calm down
Okay.
in the bottle and on the journey to the US.
Okay.
And
Cool.
then
Cool.
once the polyphenol content will always remain very high, but the pungency will just kind of like lower a little bit,
Mellow.
which is
Okay.
fine. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, so I mean, but again, like, I don't think people have conversations about a single brand producing multiple olive oils because most people don't talk about olive oil the way they talk about wine, which they should. It's like, you have varietals and you have regions and you have things that affect your crops and that add certain flavor profiles that you recognize when you have olive oil. And because unfortunately, like commercially produced olive oil at this point all has like a single note or has no flavor at all. It's just like it's adding fat, and that's just about all it's doing. You're able to like, when you're eating olive oil, you want to be able to taste something, and so like bitter is an option. I mean, sometimes super bitter is not great, but for me, bitter does work. It depends on what I'm using it for and like why I chose that. And so maybe I have 3 or 4 different bottles of olive oil because all from the same brand because they all taste different. They all give me something different. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, we need to think about olive oil candles, maybe some hair drops. Cause I just, okay, maybe
So
we
good
don't
for
eat
you.
it. I was
The
like, maybe
one,
we don't eat it. Maybe it's a cosmetic.
the one thing that we have noticed about olive oil, at least for me, because I used to use it a lot as a moisturizer, I would like for it to absorb better into the skin. And so that's where I think that once you do turn it into a cosmetic, other things have to be added to it in order
Added,
to be
yeah,
better absorbed. Um,
exactly.
but the polyphenols are amazing. Like if I'm having really terrible time with my skin, I just put some olive oil on my hands and I just kind of leave them. Just
Oh
don't
yeah.
touch anything for a little bit, and then I rinse it off
She's like,
later.
it's gonna soak in what it can, and then we'll have to wash the rest of this off, which
Yeah.
I'm okay with. I just, I don't mind a little extra work to take care of my skin or myself. So yeah. So good Lord. See, this is what happens with the hour and a half. And I'm just like, I already put out an hour and a half because sometimes there's tech issues and other times there's rambling and it's fine. Uh, so how can people, what is the best process to break up with their current olive oil and to like find their way into getting into a better relationship with your olive oil?
Well, don't throw it out. Don't do that. Okay. Just like use it or leave it in your house, or maybe I'm not here. Here's the thing, and a lot of it Southern Italians will talk about like jealousy. So I'm not jealous of you using other people's olive
Olive
oils.
oil,
I'm
gotcha.
not jealous of this industry. I encourage it. If you have another olive oil you've been wanting to try it, because now's the time, because our olive oil is not going to be arriving or shipping to the US until March.
Okay.
Pre-orders are open. So you can go to Exau, that's EXAU, oliveoil.com, and you can shop the oils. The Avis pre-order is already sold out. It's sold out in like 3 hours, which is crazy. And the Lena and the Tutti are still in stock. So you can pre-order those. They'll be shipping in March. And then what would be really incredible to do is to get a little glass, like a little shot glass, or maybe like a small mason jar that's like 2 or 3 inches high, and get 2 of them and pour your current olive oil into it, like pour maybe a tablespoon and or 2 teaspoons, whatever, into that glass. And then in the second glass, once our olive oil arrives, pour a little bit into that cup and then cover them with like a napkin or a towel or something and do a little tasting. When you taste olive oil, you actually sip it. You don't like eat it off a spoon or something.
Or dip it
Also,
in
like,
half
I'm
bread.
sorry to throw the chefs under the bus right now. I love you guys, but please stop trying to teach people how to taste olive oil off of spoons and your skin. Like, that's not how it's done. It's tasted out of proper cups, specifically the olive oil tasting cups. But most people don't have olive oil tasting cups in their house, so just use like a shot glass or short glasses.
Something short. Okay.
Exactly. When you taste them, take a decent amount into your mouth and kind of swish it around your mouth, and then kind of suck it towards the back of your throat, like do that, make that
Yeah.
noise, and
I like
then
coffee, wine, olive oil, like that process of getting it into your
exactly
palate down to your throat. Yeah. Oh yeah.
taste it the same you would wine, and then you'll be and taste the olive oil you have right now, and then taste our olive oil, and just see what you taste.
Mm,
Just see what you
yeah.
taste. Like, just explore that process and see what's there. And then you can also follow us on social media, especially Instagram. We're always posting, and our handle is Exau Olive Oil. So that's EXAU Olive Oil. And then we're also on Twitter and Facebook at the same handle.
Awesome. 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 Yeah. There was, when I moved back to Philadelphia, and there's a little place in Arizona now too where you can go in and you can taste olive oils and vinegars, and so they have them in the very small like barrels and that kind of thing, and they have the tasting cups, and you can go in and you can they have them broken out by region, and so like that was my first experience of like a properly tasting olive oil at that point, because that's all they did, and so they're like, no, there is no bread, there is no, that's not, no, here's your cup. And this is how you need to taste those, and it was a tremendous experience. Like after that, whenever someone's like, well, we have this olive oil, and then they shove you a tray of bread, you're like, I just need a little glass and I can taste it that way, thanks. They're just like, oh, I'm like, yeah, once someone tells you how to do it properly, you're just like, I can't like not do it, I can't unsee that.
Especially because all the flavors you want, when you have the point of keep having them in a small cup, is that, and covering it, is that that little cup kind of fills up with all the flavor profiles. So once you take that cover off, you're able to just like quickly smell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was great.
So.
Like that was the woman who was working. It was like me. I think me and my brother had walked in, and so like she was like, "What are you guys here for?" I'm like, "I haven't been in here yet. Talk me through the process." And so she like walked us through. So we did olive oil first, and then we did vinegars after that. And like vinegars were very similar, tasting those and same process. And so she, helped us like smell, and because she walked over, she's like, well, here's your stuff, and you got like your little kit, which essentially were your glasses, and then a few napkins. And she was like, I would go region at a time, and then like cleanse your palate a little bit. And she'd always bring something out. There were like random little cups of coffee beans around to kind of clear out your olfactory situation, and then you would start again. So yeah, so that was such a cool experience to like be able to taste olive oil properly.
We're going to start, once the oil starts shipping, we're going to start doing private tastings with people to just go through and like just teach how to properly taste and talk about olive oil and production process and everything. Because people, they've been asking us to do this for a while, have like a olive oil quick 101 crash
Yeah.
course, and then also just talk about like the production process and what goes into that, because we could talk about this for 6 more hours and we still
Oh,
wouldn't be through
absolutely.
everything.
And one day when I decide to be super indulgent, I will do something like that, because I'm like, we need things. Well, again, because I will continue and it'll be like 3 hours from now. Thank you. And again, like I said, the one thing I love about doing the podcast is that we can talk about life. And so like now when someone goes to buy the olive oil, they have so much context and so much like story behind what they're purchasing and why they're purchasing it, as well as like the experience of knowing like we kind of have we've touched the people who produce this thing now, and we have a understanding of like how they exist in the world and how they move through the world and like the things they love and what they're invested in the story. So I feel like, again, it's like it adds a bit more to the experience on the
And
user side.
everyone, please look for the harvest date, not the bottle date, the harvest date on the back of your olive oil when you're purchasing.
There you go. And if you don't see a harvest date, just go ahead and put it back away from the shelf.
I did
Go
not
on
say
the
that.
I was like, go
That's
on the
not Skylar
see, this
speaking.
is why I say these things. Go on the internet, go to the website and order a proper bottle of olive oil. I'm not here to judge. Okay, no, actually I am. I am here to judge because I think we should all be buying better products and consuming better food. And I am just here. That is my mission, to make sure you are eating better than you did last year. And if that's just changing your olive oil right now, this is what you need to do. But yeah, just go ahead and just slide that bottle back on the shelf. If there's no harvest date, they're not doing you any services. Just put it back. Get something else.